Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustments. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variances and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind that the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application, answer any questions that may arise of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your name and full address for the record, and materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state their name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same view, we do ask that you select a spokesperson to present the group's opinion. We want to hear everyone's views. However, covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then provide you with 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will be then taken into committee for a decision, and that will mark the end of all discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at the meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided for this at the back of the room. Please note that you may make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variances and 15 for consent applications to the applicant, owner, an agent, and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last date to appeal the decision to the OMB will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. Members of the audience attending this committee meeting are to be courteous and respectful of the members, as well as the committee of town staff and other people in attendance tonight. Tonight's meeting will be stream live and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. We ask that you maintain your cellular phones and pagers at least on silent, as they do interfere with the audio system. Thank you. Okay. So with this, we'll start our meeting. The regrets for this evening are Mr. Michael Talowski. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interests? I see none. Thank you. Requests for a deferral or withdrawal of an application will be taken at this time. Is there anyone here who would like to request a deferral or withdraw their application? I see none. Thank you. We have no consent applications. We will then start with our first application of the night, and that is CAV 033 of 2018 at 477 Sandmere Place. Good afternoon. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of committee. Jim Levac of Glenshnar and Associates, Inc. Our address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Suite 700, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R3K6.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're here.
Before you start, sir, is there anyone here present for application CAV 033 of 2018 for 477 Sandomir Place? Sir, you're here in opposition or in support? You're in opposition. Very well. Sir, would you give us your presentation, and then we'll ask the gentleman to approach.
Yeah, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Mohammed Abid Pirani, the registered owner of 477 Sandmere Place. The property, as shown overhead, has a total area of 697.8 meters squared with a frontage of 17.74 meters and a depth of 38.1 meters. A new dwelling is under construction on the property, having a total GFA of 285.3 meters squared. A minor variance is required to permit a reduced front yard setback of 8.68 meters, which is this point to here, whereas the bylaw requires 9.71 meters under the RL3-0 zone provisions. So this represents a deficiency of 1.0 meters. If you take a line right across the front, this shows the 9.71. So this was recently picked up as part of a review of the as-built survey. The encroachment only pertains to a portion, a maximum of 1.03 meters here, which is a at-grade porch. And there's a very small section of the garage that doesn't really show up here. It's about 6.5 centimeters that encroaches into that required setback. We've had a chance to review the staff report, and we agree that the proposed variance is minor in nature, maintains the general streetscape in relation to the other houses on the street. We further agree with the staff report that the neighborhood character is maintained, and that the minor deficiency has no unacceptable adverse impact on adjacent lots. On this basis, we would respectfully request committee's approval. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you for your presentation. If you could take a seat for a moment. Sir, would you like to approach the committee and present your point of view? Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Estes Paul Mistaklis. Would you like me to spell that?
Yes, please.
E-S-T-E-S, Paul, and then M-O-U-S-T-A-C-A-L-I-S. And I live at 448 Sandmere Place.
Okay, sir.
I have spoken to several of my neighbors, and they weren't able to attend tonight, so I'm speaking for them as well.
Do you have a list of those neighbors? Did they give you a proxy, or do you want to share their addresses, or no?
Oh, sorry.
Very well.
Yes.
So will he be representing you as well, or would you like to be speaking? Okay. So
We basically have the same point of view. So.
Okay, perfect.
My parents bought this home in 1966, and I'm living in my family home. My understanding is the Committee of Adjustment's role is to represent the interests of the citizens of Oakville and to apply the town bylaws in order to make Oakville a livable town. I'm here tonight to express my opposition to allowing any variance for 477 Sandmere. The property has not been occupied for 3 years. Construction on the building finally began in 2017-2018, and they are now requesting a variance after the fact. Simply put, they are not following the rules as outlined by the town bylaws and in the Planning Act. Rules that they had full knowledge of when they were given the permit to build the house. Basically, allowing variances for this property goes against the town plan for the following reasons. It is a request for a variance after the building has been put up, indicating either poor planning or an inability to follow the Planning Act town bylaws. I find this particularly troubling given that Mr. Pirani claims to have legal experience and runs an immigration firm. It does not preserve, enhance, or protect the character of the neighborhood and does not make Oakville more livable. Instead, there are half a dozen derelict houses that have not been occupied for the last 5 years on my street. The inappropriate setback change the sight lines and negatively affect the appearance of the neighborhood. Basically, it's making housing in this neighborhood and Oakville in general unaffordable to anyone other than the very well-to-do. I would like to point out that when we first moved to this neighborhood in 1966, the people who owned the houses were electricians, plumbers, town employees, Ford workers, and others of similar socioeconomic status. There are other parts of town where people can buy homes that are multi-million dollars. Finally, it is a request for a variance after the building has been put up, and allowing such a variance sets bad precedents and shows a lack of respect for the Planning Act. Those are my reasons for opposing this variance. Thank you for your time. Yes. Yes, you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Just a couple of clarification points. So the particular variance that you mentioned a lot of things, and you did kind of touch on this, but I just wanted to get a clearer idea. This particular variance is looking for an adjustment to a porch, a relatively small part of the garage. And yes, I do have a question as to how it happened too, and I guess we'll ask that when the applicant comes up again. But with respect to this particular building, a lot of things seem to, in your presentation, seem to deal with the size of the building, and it was changing the whole character and whatever, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is simply, this building is here, albeit we'll find out why it got done like that, but it's protruding slightly into the front yard setback. And are you saying everything would be fine if we could just push it back that 1.3 meters and then everything's okay? And that's it? Then you're cool?
Essentially,
so what is it about it you don't like?
Well, what I don't like is the fact that the setback's not appropriate, right? Yes, I touched on a number of issues, obviously, but they've had lots of time to properly place the building where it should have been. So at what point does setback become too much? You're saying, you know, over 41 inches is sufficient. That's okay, that's not a big deal. So if I do 60, is that okay?
Well,
you know, that's sort of, but there are, what I'm trying to say, sir, is that there are rules.
Yeah.
And they haven't been followed, and they're asking for the variance after the fact.
Right. When we
That's really my main
just so you
point.
know, when we look at these things, the fact that the building has been built or isn't built is actually not relevant. And as much as I may feel for somebody sometimes who has built it and this committee would rule against them, it's really not a consideration. So we'll take a look at it solely on the basis of, would we have agreed to this if it was presented to us in the first place, just so you know. Okay, thanks.
And that's kind of my question as well. Why did this happen?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Anything else?
Are there any further questions? No. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ma'am, excuse me. I understand that your points have been raised and you're satisfied, but we still do need your name and address for the record just to prove attendance. Would you, if you can speak loud enough and we can hear you, we can write it down. It's not a problem. Stephanie Bishop? 421 Sandmere. Thank you. Mr. Shar? Sorry, Levac.
Oh, sorry. And just in relation to how the situation occurred, my understanding it was picked up on an as-built survey that was being done after the construction had originally occurred. We weren't retained until after the construction had occurred. I was asked to look at this on the basis of whether it met the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and was of the opinion that it was indeed a minor variance, and I stand by that position. I understand the position of the neighbors, though, and you know, these things do happen.
When you were looking at this, where was the building supposed to be?
Well, the line that goes straight across is the 9.7. So the garage is basically there, other than 6.5 centimeters out. But someone, when they poured the foundation on the porch, either the survey crew or somebody got that wrong, because it was supposed to line up with that line.
And it didn't. All right, thanks.
Any further questions? Go
I
ahead,
just
Mr.
want to
Hardcastle.
see if there's anything further that staff may be able to offer in respect to that.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee, pardon me, staff are of the same view. The application was initially submitted for building permit with a proposed dwelling that would have otherwise complied with the bylaw. There was an error in construction at the time. The as-built survey plan is always done substantially after the foundation is poured, and an inspector is then called from the town to inspect the site when that survey is then submitted to the town for evaluation and zoning review, and it was flagged at that time. A minor variance has been submitted, as is the applicant's right to do so, whether it was before the construction or after the construction in this case. Staff have evaluated, as the committee members indicated, regardless of if the building was there or not. It's the nature of the variance that is at question, and our opinion has been provided in the comments.
Thank you, Ms. Malovich. Are there any further questions? I see none. If you have nothing further to add, sir, we will now take this matter into committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I'm in your hands if you're ready to move a motion.
Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit and reviewed the written submission, as well as the town's staff report, taking into account the objections from two of the neighbors here, noting that I still don't really know how this happened, but as I mentioned before, it's probably not as important, or certainly not important to what we're doing here. As I indicated, we would look at this thing as if the building had, whether it's built or not, is irrelevant to the situation. And in this particular case, I find that I would have approved this particular variance if it had been presented to me earlier. So I'm going to make a motion that this variance be accepted, finding it does meet all four tests under the Planning Act, making it subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued. And since we already have a building permit issued, drawings done, I find that's probably the only other condition. In fact, one could even argue that there doesn't even have to be that condition. The building permit is issued, is it not? I suggest so.
Ms. Malovich?
Staff?
Through you, Madam Chair, the applicant is required to submit a revision, formal revision on his building permit
Okay.
plans.
So
All right, then
our
I'll make it
condition
subject to
stands.
the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from this date of decision if the revised building permit is not issued.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Unanimous. Thank you. Your application has
thank you
been
very much.
approved. Our second application of the evening is at 1130 Spears Road, CAV 34 of 2018. Good evening. Is there anyone here present for application CAV 34 of 2018 at 1130 Spears Road? Good evening, sir. Are you here in opposition or in support? In opposition. Very well. Thank you. Sir, we'd like to hear your presentation, and then we'll give the member in the audience an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. My name's Charles McPhail. I'm here as agent for the owner as well as the tenant in this particular case. From Charles Lindsay and Associates, 37 Main Street in Waterdown. The purpose of this application, it's actually a duplication of a previous application that was approved. That last application having expired, gone past the 2 years limit. This occurred mainly because of a small hiccup with designers. The person originally retained to process the minor variance and then complete the building permit application was no longer involved with the project. By the time the owner retained my firm through another firm and we produced all the drawings, we were about a month past the deadline, which we found out when we made the application for the building permit, and they sent us back here. So tonight, I'm really hoping that we can get through this. We're not asking for anything different. The scope of the project hasn't changed. We're just here essentially to ask for minor variances as per the last application.
If you take a seat, we'll ask the gentleman to come down and voice his opposition. Good evening, sir.
Hello, Jeremy Willis.
Jeremy Lewis, yes.
Willis with a W.
And your address?
I'm an owner at the building next door, 1120 Spears Road.
1120 Spears Road.
That's next door to the
Were you
east.
the owner in 2015 when this application came
Yes.
before us and was approved?
Yes,
Okay.
and I raised the same concern at that time, which is with regard to the parking. At that time, the discussion was more about them having parking at the back of their property that they weren't making good use of, and there was a determination to have an access through the rear so that they would better use that parking. The problem continues, though, that they don't have enough parking spaces for their existing operation, let alone for an expansion of their operation. This is which way up do I put this? Oh, it's hard for you to see that. Those are pictures taken between Christmas and New Year's when they had a special event. So that's one of our trucks trying to get in. That's one of their clients' cars parked blocking our loading dock. And it's hard to see, but that's their parking back behind there. But then their clients continue to park across the back of our property. They have spoken in the past of trying to notify their clients not to park on our property, but we've seen no such effort to that end. When we went into the building with the truck driver, he was very helpful in getting people animated to move their vehicles. We saw no signage to the effect that they were to be respectful of our parking areas. We did get the cars cleared. We did have the bylaw enforcement come and ticket vehicles back there, and have since made the signage back there more prominent, and will continue to ticket as necessary. But that's going to restrict the amount of spaces that they effectively have available. And just to give another illustration, again, not very good lighting, but this is our parking lot in front of our building, which is completely full of their vehicles. I think maybe one of those is one of our vehicles. Quite often their operations are after our business hours, and so it's not a problem. Our insurance company may have some concerns about it, but from our operational point of view, it's not an issue. But there are times when even at that time, they clearly don't have enough parking spots for their own operations when they have to use that many of ours. But when we are operating our business, these vehicles parked down the side. Again, they're parked down the side of our building. This one's parked in front of a gas meter, so he's actually partly blocking the aisleway. They weren't able to plow alongside their building because they had garbage piled up outside the door, so they couldn't even avail of the parking that they might have used on their own property. Anyway, so that's our concern, is that they don't have enough parking now, and it does interfere with our business at times. Not always, but at times.
Very well. They're all valid concerns. We'll get you some answers. Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Lewis before he leaves?
Yeah, Mr. Lewis.
And those pictures, if you'd be kind
of
enough
course
to
you can
surrender
have
them
those.
to the Secretary Treasurer?
It's Willis, correct? Not Lewis?
Willis, yes.
yeah.
Lewis.
W-I-L-L-I-S.
W.
The last time when you were here, I remember it well, we had a fairly animated discussion about the parking. What's happened since with you and the neighbors in terms of trying to sort this out? You alluded to a couple of things, but
Well, there's
are they
been-
cooperative? Is it they're trying?
Well,
or-
because it doesn't often come up. Now, in this case, between Christmas and New Year's, the owner was present when I first went in, but when I went back in with the bylaw officer, he wasn't available. We couldn't find him. As I say, we've seen no effort. He has said he would put up signs, I guess, inside the building to notify people and be careful where they park. We haven't seen any evidence of that, and I was in the building at that time trying to find him. But we haven't had any
So-
communication. He's he's not unpleasant to deal with. He's conciliatory when we speak, but at the same time, there's been no evidence of any action taken to, and at that time, and there was snow on the ground, as you could see, but they hadn't cleared along the side of his building and hadn't fully cleared the back to avail of his parking spaces that he had, so.
And do you feel that if I'm just looking here, they want 66 parking spots versus 91. Do you feel that if there was an extra 25 parking spots there, that it would alleviate this problem?
Well, as my understanding is that they want to double the floor area, or I'm not sure exactly what part they're currently using or not using, but they want to increase the floor area, which would imply increasing the volume of business, which means, more parking spaces required than they have now, and they don't have enough now for what they're doing now.
I'd heard somewhere that they had actually, is there a chance that they'd already increased the floor area? I didn't get a chance to go in.
I'm not quite sure what the,
Okay.
when you go in, it appears most of the building is being
All right,
used, but I don't know
I'll
to
ask,
what
I'll ask the
what
applicant.
the usage is. I don't want to comment on that.
Okay. And this occurred over Christmas, New Year's. Does it happen all the time? Like
It
you know,
was,
is
we
it-
were operating, fully operational 2 days, and both of those days it was a problem. This week is March break, and they typically run activities during the day. Now, I'm just home from a couple of days at the cottage, so I wasn't there yesterday or today, so I'm afraid I can't
Okay.
speak in person on what happened. But it's these types of situations. Christmas, New Year's, it's a big time for them. It's they have 3-on-3 tournaments or something. Kids are off, and their clientele are kids playing hockey. This time of year, it's not quite as busy because the hockey season's mainly over, but they still have skills training. And during the summer as well, they'll have some skills training during the day. But in the school year, it's mostly after school hours, so that's after our normal operating hours. So it's only those, but as I say, when they do have an event on, I'm surprised you haven't got other neighbors here, because they park, 2 buildings over, and, they're
Okay, thank you.
there's a lot of vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Wills.
Thank you.
Mr. McPhail, we have several questions for you. First, the questions that Mr. Willis had in terms of the effort that your client has made with respect to clear indications of the parking. Maybe you can also give us some information about what's the intended hours of operation that your client is going to have. And we understand that there was a stop order on the work, so the work has commenced, and where it is right now, you'd give us an indication of that, and why a building permit has not been applied for as yet. You've had plenty of time while the work is going, so all these questions come to mind, and we'd like answers before we can take this matter into committee.
For sure. So in regards to the parking, the 66 spaces that are requested, as you can see by the plan, the majority of the spaces are located at the back. In fact, I think 58 of the 66 spots are located, 53 of the spots are located along the rear. And currently, the primary entrance to the building, the entire facility is through the front door. So for clientele to presently come in and drive, no one is really all that eager to drive to the rear of the property to have to access the sole entrance at the front. One of the conditions of the previous approval was to provide a second entrance at the back, which would then give people that reason to access the rear parking spots and use them, if the building becomes more functional from an access point, then these spaces, they'll be used guaranteed more often. The photographs that were all shared by the neighbor, I believe, and I may be mistaken, were all taken right after a substantial snowstorm, which also doesn't help with parking in a building being accessed by a lot of people through one door at the front. So it's understandable that there were some parking issues on those days. But I believe a second door at the rear of the building, which has to be provided and was provided in the plans that were submitted, would alleviate, I believe, almost all of the parking issues on the site. If you can refresh my mind on the next question.
Sorry?
The next question, question regarding parking, and what else did you
Okay,
have?
so the hours of operation and how you see yourself within the limits of these parking spaces without overflow into your neighbors?
As discussed, the hours of operation do vary, and they fluctuate seasonally. But currently, with not many clientele using the rear, that is producing the overflow onto the neighboring parking because there isn't that second access to the building. Once that access is provided, the existing parking spots at the rear can be utilized, and we shouldn't have that overflow anymore.
Very well. And the issue with the building permit?
The original architect involved, Josephine Young, carried through the process of attaining the last minor variance. While she was in the process of preparing drawings for building permits, she passed away. There was a short period after that where I believe the owner wasn't sure what to do, who to contact. By the time he finally found me through 2 other people, circled around, put our file together, I believe we were 2 months late on the application.
And how much of the work has been completed thus far?
Everything except for the second entrance, and the only actual work was the construction of 2 open, just 4 walls essentially, creating 2 change rooms, because it's being used as a ball hockey court.
So you still are in business?
The equipment is all in there. Whether or not he's using it, I'm not sure.
Okay, very well. Are there any other questions of Mr. McPhail at this time?
So I'm just going to make a comment. Of all the things to have actually gone and constructed, that second entrance was not one of the ones at the forefront of, I mean, it was the pivotal thing.
It's the
with
pivotal thing, but
respect-
it's also, in this project, the largest thing. It would need detailed drawings, specifications, possibly structural alterations, whereas everything else was putting equipment into a space.
And if we agreed to this thing, how quickly would that second entrance go in your opinion?
3-week appeal period, our package is all ready to be submitted. We submitted it, and it was rejected because of the time frame.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Are there any further questions of Mr. McPhail? I see none. Okay. If you have nothing further to add, we will now take this matter into committee.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
having conducted my site visit and looked at obviously I'm familiar with this one, having sat on the last committee, the written submission by the applicant as well as the town's written staff report, and also taking into account the objections from the public. I have to admit I'm concerned here. There were a lot of discussions about this particular property. It was really clear that that parking was the issue, and I would have thought that over the last couple of years there would have been more of an effort on the part of the owner to deal with this issue. I am concerned, continue to get concerned now about allowing greater uses in here. I'm not particularly impressed with the fact that the owner hasn't cooperated with the neighbor next door. I know that in my last decision, I cited on behalf of the applicant. In this case, I'm actually not going to. I really think that this site, after a couple of years of looking at it, it still has a problem, even though the expansion hasn't happened. I'm perturbed that that second door didn't go in because that was the whole focus. I'm actually going to put forward a motion of denial on these variances. I think that this thing needs to go back to the drawing boards a little bit and be looked at again.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
Matt. Madam Chair, this microphone. Madam Chair, thank you. I'm just going to highlight a couple of thoughts. I'm in general concurrence with my colleague here. I think that there's been almost 3 years here where this issue is floated out there. These issues have been long-standing, and even if the building permit process has run into hiccups, there's an opportunity to work with the neighbor and undertake measures that could alleviate this. Signage on the exterior of the property, signage at the parking areas, putting people around to the back, what have you. And none of those efforts have been undertaken, notwithstanding interventions by the next door neighbor. So I'm going to actually support this tonight.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle, for your submissions. So we have a motion of denial for this application, finding that it has not met the 4 tests. All those in support of the denial? Your application has been denied.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving along to CAV 35 of 2018 at 1198 Cynthia Lane. Good evening. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Chair. My name is Peter Del Grosso, 67 Elmbrook Crescent in Etobicoke.
Thank you, Mr. Del Grosso. Is there anyone here for application CAV 035 of 2018 at 1198 Cynthia Lane? I see none. Very well. Staff are in support of your application, sir, with one minor condition. Are there any questions of Mr. Del Grosso? Our procedural bylaw allows us to forgo with the presentation if there's no opposition. We've done our site visits.
that's
We've
fine.
read the staff
Yep.
reports.
Yep.
If you have nothing further to add, we have the opportunity to go
No.
ahead and take this matter into committee if that's okay
Yeah,
with
no,
you.
I don't have anything else to, only thing is that we've complied with what planning has asked for.
And you're familiar with the condition that they've cited, and you're okay with it? That the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated January of 2018 as
Yes,
submitted?
yes.
Okay. Are there any questions or clarifications of Mr. Del Grosso? This is application for increase in residential floor area with a second variance of height. And you were before us before in 2017, correct?
Correct.
Are there any differences from?
Yes, actually, we had an appeal from planning, and their request was for us to remove the coverage, which I did, and also to reduce our gross floor area from 48.1% to 44.82, which I also complied with. And they were satisfied with the changes that I've done.
Okay, very well. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Members, do you wish a full presentation, or are you prepared to move a motion on this application? Okay, Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead.
Madam Chair, having reviewed the materials, I'm prepared to put forward a motion at this point in time. Having reviewed the materials and undertaken the site visit, I'm prepared to put forward a motion of approval. The elimination of the coverage
slight reduction in the proposed maximum height and the reduction in the proposed RFA variance all work well together towards creating a building that's more consistent with the neighborhood. I believe that the modifications allow for the variances to be deemed to comply with the 4 tests of the Act. So I'll put forward the motion of approval, subject to 2 conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated January 2018 as submitted. The second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present to speak to this matter.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Your application has been approved.
Thank you.
Our next application is for CAV 036 of 2018 at 2434 Yolanda Drive. Is there anyone here? Hi, Mr. Kieran.
Hi.
Anyone here in attendance for application CAV 036 of 2018 at 2434 Yolanda Drive? I see none. Mr. Kieran, are there any questions of Mr. Kieran the same? Do you wish a presentation? Are we prepared to move a motion? The staff are in support of your application with the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 6th of 2018 as submitted. You're aware of this condition? And
Yes.
you agree?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anything further that you'd like to add before we take this matter into committee?
Nope.
Very well. I'm in your hands. Mr. Charlebois.
All right, Madam Chair. Again, having conducted my site visit, read the application as well as the staff report noting that they are in agreement with the variances requested, and noting that there's no one here from the public in opposition or support, as well as no written submissions in opposition or support. I find that these particular variances do meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. I'm going to put forward a motion that they be accepted, subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued. And second condition, the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 6, 2018 as submitted.
Mr. Charlebois, is there a discussion on these recommendations? I see none. All those in support? Your application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Kieran.
Thank you.
Application CAV 037 of 2018 at 3095 Riverview Street. Good evening.
Yes, thank you.
Melchan. Is there anyone here present for application CAV 037 of 2018 at 3095 Riverview Street? I see none. A new second-story addition. Do you have anything further to add?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Oh, sorry. A name and address for the record,
Yes,
please.
yes, thank you. My name is Rick Mateljan, that's Mateljan. My company is called SMDA, and we're at 79 Wilson Street, Suite 310, Oakville, Ontario.
Thank you, Mr. Mateljan. Are there any questions of Mr. Mateljan at this time? I see none. We are ready to take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the submission materials and undertaken my site visit and reviewed the staff report, I concur with the findings of staff and find that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. I would note that this is a very sensitively designed building with the second-story mass substantially contained within the roof form, drawing components of it away from the adjacent dwelling. So this really is a good effort towards maintaining the massing of the building, and so I will support the variance, finding it does meet the four tests of the Act. This motion will be subject to two conditions, the first being that the proposed additions be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated January 29th, 2018, and the second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been received. I would also note that there were no members of the public present to make a deputation with respect to this matter.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle, for your submission. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Your application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Meteljan.
Thank you. And to the member, thank you for your comments. Thank you.
CAV 038 of 2018 at 155 Allen Street. Good evening, sir. Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Michael Cochran, and I'm at 1241 Lawrence Crescent in Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. If you can just give me a moment to canvass the audience. Is there anyone here for CAV 038 of 2018 at 155 Allen Street? I see none. Thank you. Members, Mr. Cochran, do you have anything further to add to your application? We've done our site visits. We've read the staff report. Staff is in support of your application for the proposed basement addition. Members, do you have any questions of Mr. Cochran at this time? Sir, if you have no question, anything further to add, we are prepared to take this matter into committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to move a motion?
Because I don't want to see you pick up that thing all the time. Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, noting that they are in support. Noting also that that there are no written or oral presentations from the public in support or objecting. I do find that this particular application does meet the four tests under the Planning Act. I'll make a recommendation that it be approved, subject to the condition that the proposed basement addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 8, 2018 is submitted, and further subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or building permit is not issued.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Your application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Our next application of the night is CAV 039 of 2018 at 2285 Carpenter's Circle. Good evening. Your name and address for the record.
Donna Momini, 2285 Carpenter Circle, Oakville.
Sorry, what was your last name again?
Momini, M-O-N-T,
Oh, Momini.
M-I-N-Y.
That would explain what I'm doing. Thank you. Momini. Okay. Is there anyone here for CAV 039 of 2018 for 2285 Carpenter Circle? I see none. This is an application for a one-story rear roof structure on an existing two-story home. If you have nothing further to add to your application, we are prepared to take this application into committee. Do you have any questions of Ms. Momini at this time? I see none. If you have nothing further to add, okay. Mr. Hardcastle, you're prepared to move a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm prepared to put forward a motion of approval. Having reviewed the materials, including the staff report, I believe that the requested variance for the reduced rear yard setback is minor in nature and conforms to the four tests of the Act. I would note that the potential for impact is mitigated to a large degree by a lack of neighbors to the rear and fairly significant setback from the side property lines. So I will put forward this motion of approval subject to two conditions. The first being that the roof addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted. Second being that a building permit be issued within 2 years of the date of the decision. And I would also note that conservation Halton requirements should be addressed through and prior to the issuance of a building permit, so I will not be putting forward that third condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Are there any discussions on this recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle, you did mention no written or oral submissions from the public on this.
I did not, and I will accept your friendly suggestion. Thank you.
Very well. I did ask about discussion. Mr. Charlebois, I'll give you a second chance. No? There's no discussion. All those in support? Your application has been approved. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening. Application CAV 188 of 2017. This is a revised application. This is for 407 Iroquois Shore Road. Is there anyone here in attendance for 407 Iroquois Shore Road, CAV 188 of 2017, deferred from December 5th of last year? I see none. Good evening, sir. Your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair. For the record, it's Michael Connell.
Connell.
It's legal counsel at Werefolds at Unit 10, 1525 Cornwall Road, here on behalf of the owner and applicant. I don't have anything significant to add to the staff report, and I understand that you've had a chance to do a site visit, but I did want to put before you this additional drawing, which I hope clarifies the extent of the second minor variance being applied for. So the first is the elimination of the landscape buffer for a small portion along the east property line in this section here. That was always quite apparent on the draft plan, but it's the second variance request that I'm trying to illustrate more clearly, which is for to reduce the required setback to the residential zone, so to reduce it from a 100-meter setback to an 88-meter setback. So that's the area here. And you can see that that variance actually deals with only that small portion of the land which is actually in the landscape buffer. So the new building, in fact, that's being proposed here is set back further from the residential zone. Current building is at 45 meters. The new building would be at 90 meters setback, and the parking is an existing situation. The staff report makes mention of the need to remove 2 parking spaces and to resubmit the site plan. That's been done, and I believe that that was circulated to the committee, but I also just wanted to point out where those parking spaces had been. They had been in this area here. They were removed in order to increase the width of that sidewalk so that the sidewalk now meets the zoning. That's all I intended on saying this evening, subject to any questions.
You're still under site plan review, correct? Or is that completed?
Correct, although I understand that the site plan as submitted is expected to be accepted.
Okay, very well. Are there any questions of Mr. Connell at this time? Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead.
I'm not sure whether it's a question that you can answer or whether it would be staff. I just had a quick question with respect to the site plan shows a future right-of-way running through the property, lining in with the North Service Road. And I just a little bit of clarity to understand the full context of this situation. I know it's not directly germane to the variances here, but I'd just kind of like to understand the context a little bit more.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. I will ask staff if they can address that.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee, I'm going to get the date wrong. little while ago. The Midtown Environmental Assessment had taken place, which looked at a brand-new road alignment and new roads that would ultimately provide for a better transportation network that involved the Midtown Growth Center that had been identified. Through that, there is the expectation that a new road may traverse this particular property, and in which case, through the site plan process, staff are protecting for that future condition. We do not have the authority to take the land as a road widening at this time. However, working with the applicant, they have obliged and provided for this condition as an interim situation until such time as that road is actually constructed to its full capacity.
Thank you, Ms. Mihalovic. Are there any further questions or clarifications? I see none. Mr. Connell, if you do not have anything else to add, we can take this matter into committee.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you. I'm enjoying using this microphone, so I'll spend a bit more time here. Madam Chair, I'm prepared to put forward a motion of approval, having reviewed the materials, undertake my site visit, reviewed the staff report and the information that's been provided to me by staff. I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the four tests of the Act. And therefore, I'll put forward the motion of approval subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed development be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. And the second being that the approval expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would also note that there are no members of the public present to make a deputation or any written submissions provided with respect to this matter.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Thank you. Your application has been approved. Okay. Application CAV 205 of 2017 at 505 Brookside Drive, deferred from December 19th of 2017. Good evening. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Richard Dobosh, and I'm here from Abstract Design and Build, 5359 Timberlake Boulevard, Unit 23, and I'm here on behalf of the owners of 505 Brookside.
Sorry,
Oh.
I didn't hear any of it. You're so tall that you... Maybe, yes.
All right, perfect. So start over again.
We're much better. Thank you.
Madam Chair, good evening, and members of the committee.
Do you have a card by any chance?
Yes, I do.
It's so much easier.
Yeah, no worries. Oh, yeah.
And
I
I'd
get
like
that
to
all
be
the
able
time.
to correctly
It's
pronounce it as
Richard,
well.
But it's spelled way off.
So how do we pronounce your name?
Richard.
Rushad.
Yeah, but it's pronounced Richard. I just make it easier for everyone.
Okay. Rushad.
Yeah, we come before you with, well, initially, we were here before with 3 variances, and we were able to meet the planning needs and also the neighbors' needs. We reduced it to 1 variance now, and even that 1 variance, we reduced that as well too. From the original was 45.33, we reduced it to 43.81. A difference of 2.81%. Yeah, so would you like me to present, or is this...
Are there any further questions of Mr. Richard? I note that the staff is in support of your application, and we have your letters of support from the neighbors on record. Members, do you have any questions of Mr. Richard at this time? Is there anyone here? No, I did ask. Is there anyone here for application? No.
No.
Yeah. So there's no members in the audience, but we do have the letters of support on hand. If you don't have any questions of Mr. Shah, we are happy to take this matter into committee if you have nothing further to add.
Yeah, there's...
Very well. Mr. Charlevoix, thank you.
Madam Chair, Having conducted my site visit and reviewed the application, as well as the town's written staff report, which is in support, noting too that this particular application came before us before, and that the applicant did work with planning, as seemingly evident with the public, which is great. Thank you very much for that. I do note that there are 8 letters of support, and there were no written objections from the public, as well as no oral presentation here this evening. So I'm going to find that this particular variance as presented does meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. I'm going to make a recommendation that it be approved, subject to the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated January 20th, 2018 as submitted, and further subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Sharba. Mr. Richard, you're familiar with these conditions and you're satisfied? Thank you. All those in support of this recommendation? Thank you. Your application has been approved.
Have a wonderful day.
Okay, last but certainly not least. Application CAV 014 of 2018. This was deferred from January 30th at 1495 Pembroke Drive. I'm assuming you're here in support? You're part of the application? Very well. Mr. Your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Fernando Lima. My address is 5100 South Service Road, Burlington, Ontario.
So, Mr. Lima, thank you. So this application was before us in January. You have issues with your stable top of bank that affected your property. Do you have anything further to add to the application? Maybe take us through quickly.
No, not really. I think the report captures everything. Basically, we're proposing a new house, and because of the requirements of top of bank, was a technicality that the lot coverage was, the floor area ratio was a little bit under. But in taking consideration the whole lot, we're actually a little bit below the zoning bylaw. So that was the only. And we also worked with staff after the deferral to get the support of the design of the house, so the support.
Very well. And yes, we do have staff supporting your application. Are there any questions of Mr. Lima at this time? I see none. If you have nothing further to add, sir, we can take this matter into committee.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hardcastle?
Madam Chair, in reviewing these materials, the staff report, this really is a technical variance. The increased residential floor area ratio is not appreciable from the street. It really comes down to a calculation of lot area, and I think that the proposed building is fairly consistent with the new constructions that we see in this immediate vicinity. So, having reviewed the materials, I've come to the conclusion that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. And I'll be putting forward a motion of approval subject to 2 conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted. Second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present to provide a deputation with respect to this matter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. We don't have a date, but the date says the submitted ones we have here are January 2017. Okay, that's fine. Is there a discussion on the recommendations? I see none. All those in support? Your application has been approved. Thank you, sir. We have minutes to move for February 27th of 2018. Were we all here for that one? I don't remember. I think I was. Okay, who would like to move the minutes? Mr. Hardcastle is moving the minutes. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Motion to adjourn, gentlemen. Mr. Hardcastle, motion to adjourn at 8:05. Thank you, and we are adjourned.